makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
So, day three of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict has ended. I want to talk about the developments that have happened so far, and obviously the war is still raging, but this might be a shorter video than my previous ones because, at least in terms of the strategic picture, nothing has changed. And in fact, there were some important events that I guess we can interpret so far as being Ukrainian victories. Now, I want to re-emphasize this. It seems to me that the way that the war is developing is Russia still maintains a strategic initiative, but Ukraine pretty much has a tactical initiative on every single front. So that is good. That means that Russia will be dictating where and when it's going to be attacking, with what forces, with what mix of forces. But on the ground, on the battlefield, it's the Ukrainians who are dictating where exactly they're defending, where they're retreating. And so far, this has been incredibly effective. So the defense right now has been insanely good. And I'm going to when I show you the first map, I'm later going to compare it to a map of what was believed to be the Russian operational plan, and you'll see just how badly it's gone. So first, let's look at this. Very good site, liveuamap.com. It's being updated on a regular basis. Sometimes it goes down because I guess it gets a lot of heavy traffic at times, but thankfully at this moment it is working. So broadly speaking, there are five fronts. Maybe you can consider six of them, but I think five is the correct number. One is the areas around Kyiv, the capital, so over here. The other is call the Sumy front. Sumy is one of the cities that is over here. That is the area that borders, broadly speaking, the Kursk Oblast in Russia. And for those who know a bit of military history, you'll know that Kursk is where the largest tank battle in history was fought in mid 1943, and the Russians won. The first time that a German blitzkrieg was successfully blunted. And it's kind of funny because now the Ukrainians are pulling off a Kursk of their own. So, what else? The other is the Kharkiv front over here, the Donbass front over here, and the Crimea front down here. Um, Two different axes on the Crimean front, which I've talked about in previous videos. This one, I think the objective of the rightmost prong of this incursion has been an attempt to encircle the troops over here, but this would only work if you achieve a breakthrough up here. So as it is, there's no breakthrough on either side. And my suspicions that the Ukrainians were trading space for time appear to be true, and also appears that the Russians have kind of um, it's petered out a bit. And there are reports of a Russian amphibious operation near Mariupol. Now, I mentioned in previous videos that they have about one or two battalions of naval infantry. That's kind of the extent of their amphibious forces here, which is honestly not substantial. And one or two battalions is not a game changer in any way. It could be quite useful for like a very impromptu a tactical maneuver if it is necessary at that moment. It gives Russia that option, which is like Russia has a lot of options of how it can engage. It's airborne troops, amphibious troops, etc. So it has a huge mix of forces which it can choose. But something like one or two battalions would not be, a huge strategic advantage. So I don't think amphibious operations will play a big role here. And as it turns out, from what I've been reading, it has not been successful. And I have also been reading that the Ukrainians may have taken, well, the map clearly shows that it's no longer under Russian control, but that the Ukrainians have retaken Kherson. And that is incredibly good news because this denies Russia any sort of beachhead across the river. This is the Dnieper River. That could then be used to go against Odessa. And this is very difficult territory. I would not want to be attacking here because you have all these rivers that are flowing into the Black Sea. So even if they cross the Dnieper here, you still have numerous other obstacles. This is good. This is good defensive territory if your only access available to you is from this direction. On this direction, it's much more flat. There's not many obstacles. I mentioned in the video as well that if Russia, I suspect the plan is to move towards here and get behind the troops that are defending the Donbass. That would be pretty catastrophic for the Ukrainians. But appears that the defenses around the Donbass have held pretty well. In the previous video, I mentioned actually how little combat there appears to be, or rather decisive combat. There seems to be hardly any on this front. This is by far the most static of all the fronts. It's barely moved. And well, well-positioned Ukrainian troops here, and the possibility that there is some Ukrainian reserve, a more mobile reserve over here. That could be pretty catastrophic for the Russians if they decide to kind of move in this direction. I made the parallels to the Battle of the Marne, so I'm sure the Russians are very, very much aware of this. So this fast breakthrough that I feared was maybe the main the main area where Russia could achieve a breakthrough. I'm not so sure anymore. So this front looks pretty static as well. The Kharkov front, again, they're trying to, they've made very few advances. There have been Russian troops, again, sort of the elite troops trying to move into the city, but they're nowhere near capturing Kharkiv, nowhere near. There are some very impressive artillery barrages in the area, but again, as I've mentioned, a well-prepared defense has very little to fear from a mass rocket attack. So rockets are incredibly devastating against the retreating army, and that was always Russian Soviet tactical doctrine in the Cold War. They were massive fans of rocket artillery. They are devastating against an army that is retreating, because the retreating army does not have time to dig in and fortify. But in this situation where you have presumably Ukrainian troops very well fortified, very well dug in, artillery is going to look very impressive on these Twitter videos that you're seeing, but it's going to have very little impact at a battlefield level. So what else? Again, this part around the Sumy front seems to be a bit of a seesaw. The Russians took Sumy. Apparently Ukraine took it back. There's a Russian incursion that's a bit deeper here over to Konotop. There's battles going on. This is an interesting front, but I don't think that Russia really has much hope of a breakthrough either. Yeah. And the Kiev front is the one that I guess is more important in terms of what's been happening lately. And well, the first attempt to enter Kiev has failed. There were battles in the city. They were repelled. The Russian troops that were undertaking these attacks were probably among the elites. The VDV airborne troops, Spetsnaz troops. Those are special operations, other types of saboteurs. There's a lot of videos of Russians being captured in Ukrainian uniform. So they're doing some very dodgy, borderline war crime behavior there, I would say. This is not good conduct of the war. And remember, enemy troops that are captured in uniform that isn't their own, they're not subject to prisoner of war status. So this is not just, I've heard some comments that they can be like shot on sight. Not quite. International law still demands kind of decent treatment, dignified treatment to anyone that you capture, but they are not subject to prisoner of war conventions. So you can basically treat them a bit worse. You can rough them up for a bit. Anyway. Yeah, so it's been beaten back. The main Russian armored force is still in the outskirts of the city. And if these incursions aren't working, and it seems that it was basically beaten back in a matter of hours. I saw some tweets sort of later at night, kind of towards the morning Ukraine time, and there was silence, complete silence in the city. The president of Ukraine, uh, incredibly brave man, I must say. I will give him credit for that. He made a video of himself walking down the street, talking in the middle of the street in broad daylight in the morning, and there was no gunfire, no nothing. So the city was completely secured. The initial attack was beaten off, but the main battle of Kyiv is still not begun. Now, this might sound scary. You might think, well, is it true that Russia has only deployed about 60,000 of its 190,000 troops? Does that not mean that really they are the big push is coming? And the answer is yes, but I want to emphasize that this does not mean that Russia hasn't already made its major attempt at subduing Ukraine. So, you gotta understand the Russian army is a mix, like all armies. There's a mix of very elite troops. These are usually, special forces, airborne troops, naval infantry, etc. Those are trained much more than your standard infantry or regular troops in general. Then you have what I would say is sort of like I guess the armored component of the Russian army, the armored units, the mechanized units, etc. Those are a mixed bag. You will have some units that are, decently trained, not elite, but decently trained, uh, broadly speaking, capable at their job. But you will also have a lot of units that aren't very well trained. And there's some videos that I've seen that really shock me in terms of just, for example, the fact that so many videos have been taken of Russian columns, of Russian tanks, um, perhaps not on the move, because on the move, it's easy for them to not be securing this area because they're already moving. But I mean videos of Russian, heavy formations that are, standing there for, temporarily at rest, whatever. And there seems to be just no attempt at securing that area and not filming it, which I think any army would do. So these are kind of basic things that you would expect a professional army to be doing, and they're not doing. So there was also a video that showed them a Russian tank column literally ran out of fuel in the middle of a road. That is insane. That is insane. It's unbelievable. This happens to every army, I must say, but it happens like long, once your army has gone way past its logistics train. This happened to the Allied armies after they broke out of Normandy. Once they liberated most of France, they ran out of fuel because the tanks were driving at full speed ahead. That was Patton's army that just didn't refuse to stop at all. Eventually, they ran out of fuel because the trucks and the supply trains were not able to keep up with the tanks. But this is an offensive that basically took them through the entirety of France in a matter of weeks. You're not seeing that kind of advance here. It's really shocking that they run out of supplies this quickly and in such short distances. Because even where they've made their deepest advance, like here, for example, come on, you gotta be kidding me that like 50 friggin' kilometers is just too long for your supply train. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. So yeah, I'm honestly not that worried. I What I am worried about is that once these heavy troops get committed to an urban attack, it's gonna get really bloody for the civilian population because you're gonna have artillery strikes around residential areas, bombing attacks in residential areas. If the Russians are also running out of cruise missiles and precision weapons, which they don't have big stocks of, then they're going to resort to dumb bombs. And you need more dumb bombs to hit an objective than a single cruise missile. And so far, um, there has been, I would say, been some restraint in terms of attacking the civilian population. There was a video of a missile strike against an apartment tower in Kiev. That looked like it wasn't intended, to be honest. So, I'm not a fan of Russia, and I'm not a fan of their conduct of war, which can be incredibly brutal and inhumane. But I call it as it is. That did not seem like a deliberate attack. Yeah, you would not waste a cruise missile on an apartment building because cruise missiles are expensive, and an apartment building has zero military value. But that could have been an errant air-to-ground missile from an aircraft. It could have been an errant. It could have been also a Ukrainian missile, an errant surface-to-air missile. We don't know, but that did not seem deliberate. So just because so far they have shown restraint in that type of operations does not mean that in phase two of the conflict they won't, because the more it will seem that they're losing, the more they'll do everything possible to change the change the course of the war. So that is a strategic situation. I think tonight Ukraine time, we're gonna see more action around Kiev. I would probably expect another repeat of what happened. Still using airborne troops and special operations, more disruptive type combat than anything else. I don't think we're gonna see the tanks roll in yet. Maybe in a day or two. Definitely not, and I wouldn't bet on it happening tonight. The downside of all of this is that Ukraine is getting resupplied. Even countries that had committed to not sending weapons, not getting involved in any way, like Germany, have now reversed course. Germany recently announced that it was going to send 1,000 anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-air missiles. So all of these things are going to be a huge advantage to Ukraine because that is how they're winning, through very, small scale actions with very nimble mobile troops, infantry with handheld weapons that can destroy tanks and that can destroy low flying aircraft like helicopters, ground attack aircraft, etc. And from the looks of it, Ukraine's air defense system is still on its legs. It's still causing disruption. Russia has not been able to obtain air supremacy. They have air superiority on certain areas of the front, but the Ukrainian Air Force is still capable of occasional disruption here and there. So air supremacy has not been achieved. But yeah, that is the situation. But remember, I called it on Twitter a couple of days ago. I said if by day two they hadn't achieved a breakthrough, I don't think they're winning the war. I stand by that comment. I don't think Russia's winning this war. Nothing that has happened since, if anything, has made me more confident in that prediction. But having said that, I just want to insist Russia will still maintain the strategic momentum. They will be the ones more capable of applying force in different areas and using a different mix of forces. But insofar as Ukraine plays the game that it's been playing up to this point, there is no reason, even if a much larger force of Russian troops is committed in the next couple of days, which would be phase two of the conflict, those are much less well-trained troops than the ones that have fought now. And honestly, the ones that have fought now have not given a good account of themselves. They have not given a good account of themselves. So expect a very demoralized army to be demoralized even more by the fact that they know that their peers have gotten their ass kicked. So just imagine if you're a regular soldier or a conscript in the Russian army, and you're seeing that your airborne troops got their butts kicked, you're a bit scared. You don't know what you're getting into. You know what I mean? I mean, if you were, for example, in the U.S., you're a National Guardsman in a war, and suddenly you see that uh, an entire battalion of the 82nd Airborne got its ass kicked, and you're going there, you'd be scared. You'd be scared. So now let's look at some of the Twitter Interesting stuff on Twitter. This is a good tweet. I've been following this guy, and he posted this map. This was at the very start of the conflict, and I didn't see it at the time. I just found it recently, but I think broadly speaking, it is accurate in terms of I think this is what the Russians were trying to do at the time, and I'll tell you why. So first, he's basically showing the Russian plan to encircle the forces that are defending against the separatists, sorry, with armor. I presume big armor thrust against Kiev on both sides, and a bigger one here. So the problem with this is that none of this over here has materialized. Nothing in the northeastern front has materialized in any way. They have not broken out of Kharkiv. They have not broken out of Sumy. Um, yeah, and now here in the Crimea, again, this was the big plan to go towards Melitopol, which they did capture relatively quickly, and then move up and link up with the troops that broke out from here. But since this breakthrough didn't happen, this plan is completely rubbish because it doesn't matter if this army moved all the way here, which it didn't. It only got to around here to Melitopol. Um, yeah, and then possible landings. Again, I've never thought that especially like taking Odessa amphibiously, that is hard. That is tough. It's a big city. You can't take it with two battalions of naval infantry. Um, yeah, so this is this all went wrong, and this pinning force here, I think that is probably why we haven't seen much combat in the Donbass front, because indeed they haven't really planned a big offensive there. Um, yeah, so compare that with this, and you can see the scale of how their plan has failed so far. And if your first plan that you've spent weeks developing failed, then there's a much higher chance of any changes to this plan, any impromptu plan that will take days to develop or hours to develop. There's a much bigger chance that they're going to fail. So losing that initial, um, you know, if your initial plan fails, uh, it's a big one. It's a big one, and that's why I made that call of what's it called, if they didn't achieve a breakthrough in 48 hours, that's it. They're gone. Is based on that idea, because whatever changes to this plan happen in the next couple of days, they will not be as well thought out. They will not be. There is a bigger risk of disruption to those plans, and it's clear that Ukraine still maintains a high level of tactical initiative. As long as they don't lose that, it will not matter if Russia keeps its strategic dominance. It won't matter because their strategic plans will keep failing. So let's see some other stuff. This is also a very good Twitter account, Caucasus War Report. So yeah, there's more. As I speak, there is more activity in Kyiv. Wow, this is impressive. This is the railway station in Lviv. People heading to this. I think I read somewhere it's about 150,000 people across the border, etc. Here's a completely destroyed Russian convoy. Yeah, there's been a lot of videos as well of Ukrainian convoys. Like the losses on both sides have been heavy, but I suspect they've been heavier on the Russian side. But yeah, that is just complete utter obliteration. Wow. Oh yeah, apparently there's Chechens fighting. Fucking fucking traitors. Like that's insane. Just like these people should have gone to the front and then immediately switch sides. That is absolute treacherous shit. But yeah, what else? Rocket attacks. Like I said, I don't think these attacks on apartment blocks have been deliberate. that might change once they start attacking full on. But so far, I don't think, this is war. There is, not every missile, not every rocket works as intended. Kharkiv front, that's a massive. But when you see Grad, that's the name of the Russian Russian rocket launchers from World War II, and they've sort of kept that name for their rocket launchers in general. So wherever you read Grad, it just means rocket launchers. That doesn't necessarily mean the Grads. So the Grads are actually like less sophisticated multiple launch rocket systems. It's usually on a truck, whereas the more modern ones, the bigger ones, they're on a tracked vehicle. But yeah, whenever you see Grad, they're referring to any type of rocket attack, and this looks very impressive. You will probably not see anything. I've said this numerous times. You'll probably not see anything in modern war, more visually impressive than a full-scale rocket attack. But I insist, if the defenders are well prepared and they're dug in, it's just awe, no shock. Yeah, big explosion in Kharkiv. Wow. I mean, these explosions, it's not that they're using a huge missile. It's that usually it hits something that holds explosive material, so like a fuel dump, ammunition stocks, something like that. That's what causes the big explosion. It's not that they dropped, a tactical nuke right there. What else? Russian convoy ambushed. Oh yeah, fucking Chechens. Fucking traitors. Yeah, there's a lot of prisoners of war. Yep, more rocket attacks. There's a Ukrainian convoy. Yep. Saboteurs. Oh wow, that's impressive. It's a Mil-24 Hind attack helicopter. There was a phrase that the Mujahideen in Afghanistan used to say, we don't fear the Russians, but we do fear their helicopters. And what they were referring to was this bad boy. It's basically a flying tank, but you can shoot him down. Yeah, Germany will be sending 1,000 anti-tank guided missiles and 500 Stinger man-pads to Ukraine. That is obviously in addition to... Oh, so there's... Goodbye, Sukhoi 25. So the main risk... The Stinger missiles will be particularly effective for low-flying aircraft. It's not a particularly high-altitude anti-air defense system. It's mostly for portable infantrymen to shoot at helicopters or ground attack aircraft. The planes like the Sukhoi 25 will have to fly low, but if you're going to shoot down the fighter jets, the Sukhoi 27s, etc., you'll need better equipment than that. Russian soldiers wearing Ukrainian army uniform arrested by Ukrainian forces in Nikopol. Yep, this is really, really, this is bad optics, bad optics, and this is not appropriate conduct of war by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I didn't have Yeah, that is impressive. What else? Yeah, it's kind of the same stuff.
Блять, буду вас палити. Що ти, дракони обали? Готовий к новому подпалу, блять? Пизда вам, суки, єбашити будемо, блядь.
Yeah, those are British supplied. That is why it's so hard. Infantrymen armed with these kinds of weapons are very hard to to clear out of heavily wooded urban areas, especially. That is the risk of if Ukraine keeps getting resupplied. The moment that the tanks roll into to Kyiv or Kharkiv, they are sitting ducks because this guy could be standing on the fourth floor of an apartment block and you don't know he's there. And all he needs to do is open the balcony and shoot the fuck out of you. So that is why the risk to urban combat for big armored formations is huge. So that is what I say. Less trained armored formations in the city are going to be absolutely annihilated versus the more mobile, highly trained infantry forces that they've used so far, and that those have been beaten back. But yeah, that is the risk. That is the risk. Yeah. Also, during this phase one of the Battle of Kyiv, I suspect it's going to be mostly at night, because at night is when these troops, the VDV and Spetsnaz and whoever is operating, will find it easier to move around. Once the tanks are in play, it doesn't really matter. You can spot a tank day or night, it doesn't matter. But infantry is harder to root out at night. What else? Yeah, kind of the same stuff. Don't have. Yeah, so these weren't paratroopers. As to the casualties, I have only seen. So the TOS-1A is a very scary weapon. That's one of the scariest weapons that Russia has, and no other country has. That's not the TOS. That's an APC. The TOS-1 that's the TOS-1. That is basically, they call it a heavy flamethrower, but it's not really a flamethrower. It just fires thermobaric rockets, and they were used in Afghan. It's not a new weapon system. They used it in Afghanistan against Mujahideen in caves, but it's incredibly potent in open like an open territory with unprepared troops. It is designed to kill human beings. That is its purpose. I mean, obviously every weapon is designed to kill humans, but killing the human is not the intention of, for example, a tank. A tank is not designed, it will kill the human inside another tank, but its only purpose is to kill the tank. Same with most other weapon systems, but the TOS-1 is explicitly designed to kill living beings where those rockets fall. By the way, the big Zs that you see on Russian vehicles, those are basically aircraft markers and friendly fire identification. You can see they've been hastily painted, probably maybe just a few days before the invasion. Yeah. Like I've mentioned, they share a lot of the same equipment. So that's why it's also, from a distance, you will not know if one of these is Ukrainian or Russian. And finally, I made this chart, I posted it on Twitter. This is a balance of power, a comparison from the military balance 2020, which, by the way, I worked on. I'm not going to say what bits, but I did work on it. And so the problem with Russia is that it has the army of a superpower, but the funding of a mid-tier NATO country. So last year they spent 61 billion on defense, whereas, for example, France, Germany, UK spent 50 something. So it's only slightly higher than a NATO military, like a mid-tier military. And yet they have the equipment stocks of a superpower. They have even more tanks in stock than the US. Of poorer quality, admittedly. All of this equipment is not comparable to the quality of the NATO equipment. But it still looks impressive when you're just tallying the numbers. And, well, if you have a military budget that is less than 1/10 of the US, the equivalent of a military that only has like less than a tenth of your own number of battle tanks or IFVs. Something's got to give. And so that something is supply, logistics, your weapon stocks, or rather ammunition stocks, and training. All of these have to be sacrificed if you're going to maintain an army that on paper is this big. And that is the fundamental problem of the Russian army. It is a superpower army only on paper. But as events of the past 3 days have shown, it is definitely not conducting the war like a superpower could. And it won't be able to sustain a war of this magnitude the way a real superpower would, the way the US would, or the way that the Red Army in the Soviet era would, which would not have suffered from the supply problems that you see here today. So that is the fundamental problem. And like I said, it looks impressive on paper. I think that's why a lot of analysts were kind of duped about how effective it was going to be. To be honest, I frankly the reason I expected Russia was going to win this war, but it was not based on me thinking that Russia was as effective as they made themselves to be, as feared as they made themselves to be. The reason I thought Russia was going to win the wars, I did not expect Ukraine to be as good as they've been fighting, with that amazing tactical proficiency that they have. That is the reason. So yeah, I was not really duped that Russia was going to be that effective at war. And I guess events have proven it. If you're fighting an army that's at least relatively as well equipped as you, but that has the advantage of defense, is in its own homeland, and more importantly, is absolutely, with the morale sky high, you're going to struggle. And I will say it again, just so it's absolutely patently clear. I do not think Russia is going to win this war. I don't think so. I don't know what the form of the ceasefire is going to be, but I definitely think that Ukraine is going to arrive at that negotiating table in a much, much stronger position than you would have imagined. So we'll see. I would say the very least is for them to demand complete recognition of the Ukrainian claim on those separatist territories. I think that if they win this war, that is the position that they can. I think Crimea, getting Crimea back might be too far-fetched, way too far-fetched. I also don't think that they'd be able to take it, even assuming they wipe the floor with Russia, and then sort of go on the offensive in Crimea. I don't know. Seems a bit too much. It's much easier to defend than attack. So, on that note, today I'm not going to talk about the anti-war left that I've been criticizing in every video. I'll give them one day to gather strength. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. And I will make another. I'll keep making video every day, maybe 2 if events warrant. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Please, I keep forgetting to say this, but follow me on Twitter as well. I'm constantly retweeting a lot of the other tweets from the sites that I've shown here. So yeah, honestly, the media is not doing a good job at covering the war. You're not getting stuff like really deeper analysis of stuff like this. So there you go. If you enjoyed this, please share and please like and subscribe to this channel. And I will see you next time.